My name is Naomi. I'm 29 years old. This is a story about a crumbling empire, an empire of fried chicken. By 2007, Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen, a brand once synonymous with the vibrant, spicy flavors of New Orleans, was in a free fall. Its stock price had cratered, customer satisfaction was at an all time low, and a civil war was brewing between the corporate office and the hundreds of franchise owners who were the lifeblood of the company. They were losing money, they were angry, and they felt utterly abandoned. Into this chaos walked a new CEO, Cheryl Batchelder. The franchisees met her with open hostility. They didn't see a savior, they saw another corporate suit. They were about to learn that the woman they would dismiss as a servant was the only person who could save them from themselves, and in doing so, become the most powerful person in the room. They called her a servant, a glorified waitress. When Cheryl Batchelder took over the fastest sinking restaurant chain in the EM country, the people she was there to save treated her with open contempt. In her very first meeting with the franchise owners, they didn't just want change, they wanted a palace coup. They wanted everyone from the corporate office replaced. They didn't trust anyone. Her vision for the company wasn't a ruthless top down strategy of cuts and closures. It was a philosophy so unconventional, so at odds with the cutthroat world of fast food that they almost laughed her out of the room. It was called servant leadership. This is the story of how that mocked idea would spark one of the most incredible business turnarounds of the 21st century. To understand the sheer scale of the challenge Cheryl Batchelder faced in 2007, you have to understand just how broken Popeyes was. The company had churned through four CEOs in just 7 years, creating a vacuum of trust and a culture of chaos. On Wall Street, the company was a pariah. After starting out strong in its early days, the stock had plummeted, ending 2007 at a disastrous 11.32 a share. But the real rot wasn't in the stock price, it was in the restaurants themselves. Guest visits were declining, sales were weak, and profits were evaporating. The heart of the problem was the toxic relationship between Popeye's corporate and its franchise owners. These weren't just managers, they were entrepreneurs who had invested their life savings into the brand, and they felt betrayed. Inside the corporate headquarters, the attitude towards the people on the front lines was one of disdain. In her book, Dare to Serve, Batchelder described the toxic mindset she discovered. The franchise owners were seen as difficult. The restaurant teams were dismissed as poor performers. And the guests, the very people they were supposed to be serving, were considered impossible to please. It was a culture that blamed everyone but itself. This wasn't just a business problem, it was a human problem. The franchise, we owners, the people who wore the Popeyes logo on their shirts every single day, had lost all faith in the people who were supposed to be leading them. They saw the executives in their ivory tower as out of touch and arrogant, and they weren't entirely wrong. The corporate office wasn't even measuring the one metric that mattered most to a franchisee: restaurant level profitability. They were flying blind while their partners on the ground were crashing and burning. The anger was palpable. They were tired of empty promises and watching their dreams die a slow death, one unsold piece of chicken at a time. The kingdom was not just crumbling, it was at war with itself. Into this hornet's nest walked Cheryl Batchelder, a seasoned executive with experience at KFC and Domino's. She knew the franchise world, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the reception she received. Before she even officially started, she attended a franchisee meeting and was met with a wall of hostility. As she described it, they wanted a palace coup. They demanded that she fire her entire leadership team. They didn't trust anyone from corporate, and they had no reason to trust her either. She was just the latest in a long line of potential failures. In a tense boardroom surrounded by angry, desperate entrepreneurs, Batchelder didn't present some 100-page deck filled with complex financial engineering. She didn't promise to slash and burn her way to profitability. Instead, she and her new team proposed something radically different. They had spent time analyzing the best and worst leaders they had ever worked for, and they came to a profound conclusion. The only way to fix Popeyes was to flip the entire leadership pyramid upside down. She told the franchisees that the corporate office would no longer be their overlords. Instead, her team would become their servants. Their primary customer would no longer be Wall Street or the board of directors. Their primary customer, she declared, would be them, the franchise owners. The mission was simple: make the franchisees successful, and the rest would follow. The reaction wasn't exactly celebratory, it was one of deep, profound skepticism. Servant leadership? To these battle hardened business owners, it sounded soft. It sounded like a corporate platitude. They had heard inspiring words before, only to be let down. They didn't need a servant. They needed a warrior who could fix their supply chain, bring customers back, and put money in their pockets. They looked at Cheryl Batchelder and saw a woman proposing to serve them. But in their minds, they were the ones who had been serving a failing corporate parent for years. They treated her idea with contempt because they believed it was just another flavor of the same empty promises. They would soon learn that servant leadership wasn't about being soft, it was about being strategic. It wasn't about being subservient, it was about having the humility to listen and the courage to act. It was a gambit, a calculated risk that would either save the company or be the final embarrassing nail in its coffin. The first rule of servant leadership is that the answer is always in the room. So Cheryl Batchelder didn't hide in her office. She began a listening tour, traveling across the country not to give speeches, but to ask questions and take notes. She went into the kitchens. She talked to the cashiers, the cooks, the managers, and most importantly, the franchise owners. She heard it all: frustrating supply chain issues, weak marketing, and inconsistent service. She listened as owners poured out years of frustration, detailing every way the company had failed them. Instead of getting defensive, she did something revolutionary. She listened and she took action. Her team took all that feedback, identified the top 7 most critical issues, and created a clear roadmap to fix them. This wasn't about some grand abstract vision. It was about solving the real world problems that were making it impossible for franchisees to succeed, like improving the speed of service in the drive through. But trust isn't built overnight. For every small win, there was still a mountain of skepticism. One of the biggest points of contention was the look of the restaurants themselves. They were dated and tired. Batchelder's team knew a remodel was long overdue and presented a new design prototype in 2008. The franchisees hated it. They voiced their dissatisfaction loud and clear. A typical spotlight leader focused on their own ego might have pushed it through anyway, but a servant leader listens. Batchelder's team scrapped the entire program and went back to the drawing board. This was the philosophy in action, choosing to serve the franchise owners, not their own egos. Still, the financial results were slow to turn. Then came a rock bottom moment, a meeting where the new strategy was put to the ultimate test. Batchelder presented a strategic plan that included an increase in franchisee fees to fund a national advertising campaign, something the brand desperately needed. The franchisees balked. They countered with a demand of their own. They would agree, but only if Popeye's corporate invested an additional $6 million to extend the campaign. This was the moment of truth. Agreeing would mean knowingly lowering corporate earnings, a move that would be punished by Wall Street. It would hurt the stock price in the short term. It was a direct conflict between serving the franchisees and serving the shareholders. Batchelder didn't hesitate. She agreed to their terms. It was a stunning act of trust, a tangible demonstration that she was willing to put their success ahead of her own short term metrics. It was a multi-million dollar bet on her philosophy, and it was the decision that would change everything. It took 2 years of painstaking work, of rebuilding trust one franchisee at a time, before the real turning point came. The design team, after scrapping their failed first attempt, came back with a new store concept, the Louisiana Kitchen. It was warm, it was authentic, and it captured the unique heritage of the brand. This time, because they had been included in the process, the franchisees loved it. As Batchelder would later say, when franchisees are happy, they move fast. The momentum was building, but the true climax came at a major franchisee conference. The mood was still cautious. They'd seen glimmers of hope, but they had been burned before. The chief financial officer took the stage to present the latest results. A hush fell over the room as the numbers appeared on the screen. For the first time in years, the news was not just less bad, it was good. Same-store sales were up. Restaurant profitability, the metric they cared about most, was climbing. Then Cheryl Batchelder took the stage. She didn't take a victory lap. She didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, she put the results into a powerful context. She showed how Popeye's performance was now outpacing its direct chicken competitors. More than that, their growth was outpacing the entire fast food industry. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were winning. The data was undeniable. And then came the moment that sealed the victory. A prominent franchisee, one who had been among the most vocal and hostile in those early days, stood up to speak. He had been one of the leaders of the Palace Coup movement. He walked to the microphone, and in front of hundreds of his peers, he publicly admitted he had been wrong. He talked about how his own profits were up, how his belief in the brand was restored, and he announced his commitment to remodel his existing restaurants and build new ones. It was a powerful, unscripted testimonial that sent a shock wave through the room. The biggest critic had become the biggest advocate. The wall of hostility that had greeted Cheryl Batchelder just a few years earlier had eyes crumbled, replaced by a wave of applause and a shared sense of victory. The servant had delivered on her promise. She had made them successful. And in that moment, the power in the room shifted forever. She had earned their trust not by demanding it, but by proving she was worthy of it. That conference was the spark that lit the fuse. The success story of one franchisee became a blueprint for all. A wave of reinvestment swept across the nation. Franchisees, now armed with profits and confidence, began eagerly remodeling their restaurants into the new Louisiana Kitchen design. By the end of 2014, an incredible 80% of the restaurants would be remodeled, transforming the face of the brand. The numbers told a story of staggering success. Over the course of Batchelder's tenure, average restaurant sales grew by an astounding 45%. Bottom line profits for franchisees more than doubled. The company that couldn't get out of its own way was now a dominant force. Popeye's market share in the chicken segment grew from a paltry 14% to a formidable 24%. And what about that sad, forgotten stock that was languishing at around $13 when she took over? It began a relentless climb. eventually soaring past $40, then $60. Franchisee satisfaction, once at rock bottom, skyrocketed. Popeyes would eventually be ranked as the number one franchise partner in the entire restaurant industry with a satisfaction level of 95%. The culture of blame was replaced by a collaborative partnership. Franchisees were now integral to the innovation process, helping develop sales driving new menu items. The relationship was no longer adversarial, it was a true partnership built on mutual respect and shared success. Cheryl Batchelder was no longer the outsider they treated with contempt. She was the leader who had orchestrated the entire turnaround. She had dared to serve them, and in doing so, had unlocked a level of performance no one had thought possible. By 2017, the transformation was complete. Popeyes was no longer a cautionary tale. It was one of the most respected brands in the restaurant industry, with nearly 3,000 restaurants worldwide. The ultimate validation came in February 2017. Restaurant Brands International, the parent company of giants like Burger King and Tim Hortons, announced its intention to acquire Popeyes. The price tag was a stunning $1.8 billion, and the price per share, $79 from just over $11 in 2007 to $79 a decade later. It was a testament to the immense value that had been created. The company was sold for what was believed to be the largest multiple ever paid for a publicly traded restaurant concept at the time, a clear sign of just how prized the brand had become. Cheryl Batchelder stepped down as CEO following the acquisition, her mission accomplished. She had taken a company on the brink of collapse, plagued by infighting and despair, and turned it into an industry powerhouse. She proved that leadership isn't about the spotlight, it's about shining that light on others. She proved that serving your people isn't a soft skill, it is the most powerful and effective path to superior performance. The woman they treated like a servant became the most powerful person in the room, not by taking power, but by giving it away, not by issuing commands, but by building a partnership. She became the one they needed most because she made the courageous choice to put their needs first. The Popeyes turnaround is a powerful testament to a different way of leading. What's your experience with this style of leadership? Have you ever seen a true servant leader in action and the impact they had? Let us know your story in the comments below. And if you found this story as inspiring as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible business stories. In business, we're often taught that leaders must be commanding and authoritative. The story of Cheryl Batchelder and Popeyes teaches a different lesson. It shows that true strength is found in humility, that the best way to lead is to serve. The leader they treated like a servant became the master of a thriving empire, not by ruling with an iron fist, but by having the courage and the wisdom to dare to serve.